I'm very privileged to welcome you here today to as chair to this kickoff webinar. This is a project which we in ELI is very proud of. It was adopted in July 2023 by the Council, and we believe it is an important project, and we look very much forward to follow the outcome in due course. Today we have we are so fortunate to have 6 speakers. We have Eugenio Barcelona, who is also project advisor and his equity partner in Pedosoli Studio Legale and professor of corporate law at the University of Eastern Piedmont. And then we have Hannah Surmats. Hannah is head of policy in Philanthropy Europe Association, also called PhilAP, and you are also an ELI reporter, and welcome to you also. And then we have Michael Redbrake. Michael, you are project co-reporter on this project, and you're also legal counsel on Bosch Stiftung, and very welcome to you also. And then Anne Saunders, and you are also co-reporter, and you are chair for civil law, company law, and the law of family business and cooperative judicial studies at the University of Bielefeld in Germany. Very welcome to you also. And then we have Ivan Todt, and Ivan, you are chair of our MCC in the ELI, that's our membership committee, but you're also assistant professor and head of the Department of Business Law, Faculty of Economics and Business at University of Zagreb. And then last but not least, we have Sten Thomsen. Sten is project co-reporter and one of, well, I would say the one who came up with the idea. And you are also a professor at the Novo Nordisk Foundation, Enterprise Foundation as it is called, in Copenhagen, at the Copenhagen Business School and European Corporate Governance Institute. As you will know from the program, the time frame is very tight, and unfortunately attendees to this kickoff webinar, and I understand we have more than 100 who have actually expressed their interest in participating, but unfortunately you will not be able to speak. It's only a view-only session. But the questions you have, please put them in the Zoom Q&A function, and I will then try, when we have heard the 6 interventions, to summarize the questions and ask our panelists to reply. And then just a small thing before giving the word to our first speaker on the agenda, which is Professor Sten Thomsen, for presentation of the project, its scope and aim. I just want to mention that the session will be recorded and shared afterwards with ELI members and attendees, and therefore you'll be able to watch it all afterwards also if you want to. I'm sure we will have a very interesting afternoon, 1.5 hours we will have together. And Sten, now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anne Birgitte. It's daunting that this seminar will be preserved forever for posterity. So, but I shall do my best, and I will actually share my screen right away to get going. I only have 10 minutes. So I'm introducing the ELI project on enterprise foundations, and we are a team of reporters. Me, Anne, and Michael Redbrake, who are here, and then Mark Urberg, who's our assistant, who's doing all the work. And basically, you know, just to get you started on this, enterprise foundations, the way we see them and the way we'd focus the project will be on foundations which own companies. And we have several interesting cases like Robert Bosch, Carlsberg, Kaiser Bank, IKEA, various parts of IKEA, Pierre Fabre, Rolex, and so on. Many interesting companies who are owned in this way. And recently they have become very, interesting to the discussion because they are regarded as archetype purposeful companies. They do philanthropy, they exercise long-term ownership, and they're also regarded as more responsible to stakeholder interests. The research indicates that the foundation-owned companies do well, both financially and in terms of their social responsibility, but there's a problem. We have a very unclear framework for this institution. So this is, of course, where the ELI project comes in. Just let me mention some names. Most foundation-owned companies in the world are European. So we estimate that around 3/4 of all enterprise foundations and foundation-owned companies are European. So this is a European invention. And you see many prominent companies which we would not want to do without, like, let's say, Carl Zeiss or, Robert Bosch or Bertelsmann, or Rolex or Victorinox or, and so basically, and it's also moving, so some, there are still new companies. Maybe Eugenio can talk a little bit more about that, new foundational companies being established. So this is an interesting ownership form. And the Americans are moving. Patagonia just shocked the world by announcing a couple of years ago that they would move to something which is equivalent to foundation ownership. They had to bend the American rules to do it, but it's doable now. And Michael Bloomberg just recently indicated that he would go the same way. So we have two iconic American companies who have chosen foundation ownership. So the Americans are moving, and of course, we shouldn't be left behind in Europe. That's part of the message for this. That's why I mention it. So it's that inspiration. So let's look at the project. The project that we have, first, we of course need to come to terms with defining what an enterprise foundation is. We say foundations which own companies, but what is a foundation? And what is a company, by the way? A business company and so on. So we'll have to be more clear on that. And this is part of the first meeting that we have. We also have a project which we call Comparative Enterprise Foundation Law, or sometimes we call it Elements of Enterprise Foundation Law, where we look at different legislations, legal frameworks around Europe, primarily Europe, and look at whether what kind of purposes can foundations have. Can they have a company purpose, for example, as to own a company? What kind of governance requirements are we talking about? How much influence can founders have? What kind of transparency is there? Is there, for example, a foundation register? What is the tax situation, and so on and so on. So this is all very interesting, and we already know from previous projects great variance in even within Europe. Then, as an outcome of that, we have promised that we would like to come up with something which would look like a model European enterprise foundation law. Now, this is going to be difficult. But difficult for countries to just emulate that proposal, but it can play a role as a kind of pedagogical exercise where we have the house on the hill, so to say, the ideal picture, if you will, and then we can see how we can approach that in real life at the European level. And finally, we have promised to have a section or a part of the project dealing with the legal barriers to enterprise foundations. And here we are talking not just about the legal barriers to establishing enterprise foundations, but also the barriers to their efficient operation, which are substantial. So basically, the workflow we were approved, as Anne-Birgitte said, in July. We will have the first workshop, the 13th of December. We'll have another workshop dealing with comparative aspects in June. And a real conference, a big one, where, by the way, Colin Mayer, the purpose advocate, will be there in person, he promised, and then we'll deliver the project in April 2025. We have not built in delays into our plans. So we will, of course, abide by the plan. Just by way of ending this, I should say that some of the themes which we're discussing for the 13th December workshop are defining enterprise foundations. We're working on the definition, and we're also working on variations here. So what, can we talk about family foundations, or and do they have to have a philanthropic objective also, and so on? So various subsets, if you will. And we also think that we need to come up with a text which states the policy case very clearly in not too many pages, maybe 5-10 pages, so that we have a document to refer to, all the arguments, and by the way, also some of the counter arguments to enterprise foundations, discussing them and how we can deal with them. We plan to do something unusual for a legal project. We will actually try to survey legal experts in the project. We have a number of legal experts assigned to the project. So we'll actually ask their opinions, in a survey format, so they can come in, what kind of, enterprise foundation law is there in your country? Are they allowed, and so on? So we make use of our really extensive network. Thanks to ELI, we have such a great network, and we think we'll use it actually in multiple surveys to gain knowledge and insights from our esteemed advisory board, for example. Then in the workshop, we'll also have Colin Mayer coming in virtually, and he will talk about how he sees enterprise foundations in the broader corporate purpose debate. And so it's interesting that if enterprise foundations are the archetype because purpose organizations, because purpose is so central to enterprise foundations. But Colin Mayer is working to get purpose adopted by companies in general, listed companies. And the problem is here, we have a really good commitment mechanism in the foundations. You cannot change it. There's supervision and so on. But what about ordinary companies? Can it really work for ordinary companies? So, and then after these initial, deliberations, we will have a set of country reports. We already have closed one. We will have a presentation on France, Enterprise Foundation in France, law and practice, but there will be others from a subset of countries. We cannot have all countries since we only have one day for the Copenhagen, but we'll have some of the ones which have not already been covered by previous work. And so yeah. So we're really looking forward to this, and we look forward to meeting the people. So we'll have a good chance to interact both personally and socially, and also intellectually. That's it for my sake. I think I'm within the time frame, I hope.
Thank you so much, Steen. You definitely did. I just wondered here whether we should just, whether you would say a little bit more now on the 13th of December, when you expect to send out an invitation, and when people should put it in your calendar, because I understand this is a workshop where you will you expect people also to be present, actually physically, and
it will be a hybrid workshop.
Yeah.
Basically, it will be possible to participate online, and some people like Colin Mayer will participate online. But of course, anybody who is willing to travel to Copenhagen and can put it into their calendar is more than welcome. So that's very important. And I should also say that we already did send out a save the date, but we're going to come back with something, a more finalized program. Maybe not the complete program, but something where you that you can sign on to, so to say. Yeah. We already have a few people who signed up, but yes, we should have that. Thank you very much, Anne-Birgitte.
Great. Yes. Then Anne Sanders, I think you are next on my speaking list, and I think I've noted that you will make some comments on also on the comparative part of the project, but probably also some other issues you want to touch on. So Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see the slides now. Yes? Okay. So thank you very much. I'm extremely pleased to be here, and it's a great honor for me to be involved in this fantastic and interesting and important project. So I will briefly mention some points about the comparative part of the project. And I'm sort of the one who deals with that in the main way. But I'm very much helped here by our wonderful assistant Mark, who is also or has already contributed and collected a lot of wonderful material. So we work in this closely together. Steen has already touched upon the major comparative issues. I mean, so far, enterprise foundations is a topic that hasn't been as well researched in the past as it deserves to be. And but from our previous work, Steen and I, we have already identified a couple of extremely important topics which need to be addressed in this context. Something like the admissibility of enterprise foundations. Are they allowed in the countries or not? Then point two, what purposes can a foundation pursue? Must it be some sort of charitable purpose, or can it be different purpose? Then how flexible is the founder to change the purpose? Who can change a purpose, adapt it to changed circumstances? Can the founder do that? Who can do it, and how flexible is it? Important point as well. Fourth, public supervision. What kind of public supervision is there? Who is responsible for public supervision? Is it a public board? Is it a court? Is it and if it's a public institution, which public institution? Is it connected to a ministry? Is it, for example, a ministry of trade and industry, like in some countries? Is it something else? How well staffed is this institution, and how, are they knowledgeable? And also the scope of the supervision. Is it a legality, or is it something deeper? So this is also important. Then fifth, transparency. Transparency is of major importance. If there is a register, for example, what kind of information can you see on the register? In Germany, for example, a federal foundation registry will only be established in the future. In other countries, this is more usual and already established. What kind of information can you get from there? If there's a founder who is interested in keeping privacy, how important are such issues? And in the Nordic countries, for example, transparency issues are of major importance. In other countries, maybe privacy is more stressed. So this is also a major importance. Transparency is, of course, also of vital importance if we want to address problematic issues, like can foundations be misused for money laundering and for other purposes. So, of course, we need to really address those issues. Closely connected to that issue is governance. What kind of governance do we have? Public supervision only? What kind of governance structures should there be? Can there be inside the foundation? And how will those governance mechanisms interact with the supervision? Are there, for example, recommendations or rules on the composition of foundation boards? How will they interact with the company that's owned by the foundation? So this is also, I think, an issue of major importance in many countries, on which we need much more knowledge than we now have. Then seventh, taxes, of course. There's a saying in Germany that if there's something in the area of governance or corporate law or foundation law, which is difficult to understand, then it usually has a tax reason behind it. So we cannot address this whole issue without some sensitivity to tax issues involved. And I think that if we all look at all these circles here, we see that all of them interact. They overlap, they're all connected, and we'll have to see how we address them. And but we have a great network to address it. So far, we have 23 legal systems involved, experts from all these different countries who are interested, who are on the advisory board, who are interested, and who will contribute. And not only the Nordic countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway, of course, but we have important people joining from countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Croatia, great interest from there, Hungary, but also other countries. And we see this must all be looked at is from a European perspective, not only from the Nordic countries, but from all the countries we have involved. And we are very much looking forward and thrilled to be part of this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and it's very interesting, and also interesting that there's already, as you say, 23 countries involved in the work, and there might be more once you have started your work. It's going to be very interesting. My next speaker is Michael Redbrake, and I understand, Michael, that you will say something about the legal barriers as you see them probably for the enterprise foundations, and I look very much forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm very pleased to be here, and I can give you some gimmicks from the practical work in these circumstances. Referring to Steen's slide about the legal framework, I would like to give you a brief insight into legal barriers that enterprise foundations have to overcome in everyday's life and everyday's working. Yes. Consider the Robert Bosch Foundation currently operates around 1,000 flowing funding agreements in Germany, other EU areas, and non-EU areas. Think about the Robert Bosch Foundation is structured as a capital company with 9 shareholders as natural persons. Due to this special structure as an enterprise foundation, I would like to present 3 subject areas that are to be viewed as legal barrier and fundamentally affect our work and the impact of our foundation. I think that's very important. Stan always recommended this. The 3 subject areas are registration requirements, compliance with legality, and general legal acceptance of enterprise foundations. Anne returned it. In the area of registration obligations, the Robert Bosch Stiftung, in its capacity as a legal form of a capital company, often has to register abroad. As part of our due diligence processes, an investigation and, if necessary, consultation with the local authorities take place as to whether and to what extent the registration obligations are being compliant with. This challenge is that many foreign legal systems do not differentiate between the 3 levels of the shareholder, the Bosch Foundations, and the Bosch company. That's really a problem in daily business. Yeah. In this respect, I must constate that this is really a legal barrier. Yes. I don't want to emphasize yet special states or special countries. I think every country has its challenges here. We have a particular problem in the area of legality. Legality in this sense means compliance with the local legal system when carrying out our cooperation or financial support in the area of achieving charitable pursuits. In recent years, some states have tended to adopt restrictive NGO legislation and in particular wanted to prevent the inflow of foreign fundings. That's a big problem for especially in big states like Russia or China. As part of our due diligence processes, tests actually had to be carried out to determine whether a respective project was really feasible. Yes, of course, this is a very hard feasibility study involved in our due diligence processes. In many countries, we had to go under the umbrella of existing organizations or other non-profit organizations. Yeah, think about in China, we had to work with universities as public entities in order to be able to achieve any impact in this country. And especially in the circumstance of our tax-privileged purposes. Regardless of whether the respective local NPO law is compatible with supranational law, a consideration must be really made as to whether the violation of the local regulations must be taken in account, and if necessary, the project has to be cancelled. As we have, I think, I'm working at Bosch since 7 years. In 40 cases, we really cancelled the project because of these legal barriers. Last but not least, I would like to point out the situation that many legal systems do not differentiate between the enterprise foundation and the company when regulating charitable activities. In this respect, there's often insufficient acceptance when it comes to the approval or regulation of activities in the area of charitable purposes. In practice, such legal barriers must be overcome in close cooperation with the communication units of Robert Bosch Foundation and Bosch Company. So suddenly you have a communication issue if you want to make a really good project, for example, in Bosnia, Republic Srpska, etc. I hope that these 3 practical examples have shown you the legal barriers. I could talk 10 hours about this very interesting issue, but it is really, I would say, a legal barrier. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm sure we'll get back to this also in the Q&A. This is a very interesting area on the barriers, as understood. Both there might be some in the EU actually, but there are also barriers outside of the EU, which creates a problem, maybe because the rules in the EU is not clear enough. This was very interesting. Then our next speaker is Eugene Barcelona, and I understand, Eugenio, that you will reflect a little bit from the perspective of a practitioner, but also touch on some other areas. And look very much forward to hearing your intervention.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm also very pleased to attend this beautiful webinar concerning this very thrilling project on enterprise foundations. Let me just tell you that I have two sides, two hats, so to speak. I am a professor of corporate law, and I'm very much interested in firm ownership models, so have an academic interest in the enterprise foundations. But I am also a practitioner, I'm a lawyer, and therefore I know what Italian entrepreneurs think, what their wishes are, and therefore the two things, the professional side and the theoretical side, interact with each other, I hope, in a positive way. So let me start by saying that Italy, the jurisdiction that I represent, would enormously benefit from the success of this ELI project on enterprise foundations, and notably from the envisaged adoption of a model law for enterprise foundation, for European enterprise foundation. And these for two main reasons: visibility and legal certainty. Visibility, a legal construct that is currently little known by market players, such as the Strange Beast Enterprise Foundation, would become, thanks to this project, easily recognizable in its key features and would enlarge a catalog of available organizational forms that can be adopted for the owner of a firm. We know other types of owners that are more conventional, families, financial institutions, state. The foundation as the owner of the firm is something quite unique and atypical, unconventional. Secondly, the project could significantly contribute to overcoming certain legal uncertainties that hover around industrial foundations world in Italy and currently limit its potential further growth. A few notes about the original approach of Italian legislation and scholarship. In Italy, we have still in force a 1942 civil code that only has few rules that are dedicated generically to foundations. And against this backdrop, the traditional approach in Italy about industrial foundations was really quite negative. Firstly, the combination of a non-for-profit owner owning a for-profit business seemed contradictory at first sight. And secondly, and more importantly, placing a for-profit business in the hands of uninterested decision makers was thought to put in place an inefficient enterprise ownership model. In terms of the classical law and economics, the industrial foundation model was thought to significantly exacerbate the so-called agents problem. Despite this original hostility in the last 20 years, Italy has become a much less unwelcoming environment for industrial foundations or enterprise foundations. And both the public and the private sector played a significant role in this direction. On the former front, the public sectors, it was thanks to the initiative of the state that the model of enterprise foundation was used in the framework of the privatization of banks. Bank businesses that were previously controlled by public law entities were transformed into joint stock companies, and the relevant shareholding, this is the important part, were placed at newly established private foundations. And the establishing of these banking foundations paved also the way for the first organic regulation in Italy concerning the governance, the important matter of the governance of these specific industrial foundations. On the private front, the one that Stine was referring to previously, we in Italy have been recently witnessing some conspicuous examples of industrial foundations that are organized at the initiative of certain well-known Italian entrepreneurs that basically wish to establish an eternal alter ego, the foundation, which is tasked with a mission to safeguard the founder's specific entrepreneurial values. And these private initiative industrial foundations can be seen, therefore, as a specific form of evolution from family businesses, and their basic meaning is that the basic purpose that is pursued is to ensure that those family values that contributed to the firm's success over the years can be safeguarded for good, thus ensuring the longevity, successful longevity, and corporate identity of that previously family-owned business or firm. What I find particularly interesting about enterprise foundations, and I'm not referring to the Italian case, but here I'm speaking more generally about industrial foundations in general terms, is the contradiction between theory and practice. Theory, and notably the classical law and economic approach, views such unconventional ownerless entities as doomed to an inescapable failure as a consequence, basically, of the total decoupling of ownership and control. Those who control the enterprise, be it the managers of the foundations or the parties that are entitled to appoint them, have in principle no title to the economic benefits that derive from the controlled business. And those who benefit from the foundation's grants or distributions have no title to manage the business. This is the clear decoupling, total decoupling of ownership and control. But practice shows that despite the pessimism shown by the theory, industrial foundations are financially competitive as opposed to more orthodox firm ownership models. And very often they are also much more virtuous when it comes to social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and sustainability. In other words, so to speak, the practice says us that the industrial foundations can be seen as a perfect interpreter of that stakeholderist capitalism that is at the center of nowadays debate on corporate purpose. Steen was mentioning Colin Meyer, who's working a lot on this concept of corporate purpose, which is a means to deviate from shareholder primacy to a more stakeholder-oriented capitalism, and generally speaking, a sustainable corporate governance, which is also a very important part of the initiatives taken at the European level. I don't think that theory is wrong and practice right, or vice versa. I think that there must be a way to reconcile the pessimistic view that comes from theory and the optimistic data that come from practice and experience. So it is my conviction that the risks associated to the decoupling of ownership and control, which is the key feature of foundations and of industrial foundations, are real. But I also think that these risks may be mitigated or even neutralized by well-conceived governance regimes. So governance becomes really central and I think it will be the core matter on which the model law has to focus on. And that is why I can conclude by saying that in order to come up with the most ambitious model law, it is crucial, this is my suggestion, to thoroughly examine the charters, the bylaws of as many European industrial foundations as possible, so as to distill those governance features that proved successful in practice in addressing the inefficiency risks highlighted by theory. So this is my suggestion for this beautiful project, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this very interesting seminar.
Thank you so much, Eugenio. It was very interesting items you touched upon, and I'm sure if nobody else gets back to them, I will get back to some of them on the Q&A, especially I think the ESG is very interesting. So we will get back to that. Our next speaker is Hannah Surmatz, and I believe, Hannah, you will tell us a little bit about Filea, but also your feedback on the project as you have seen it as of now. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Can you see my screen as well?
Yes, I can see it. So
perfect. So just briefly, so I'm here to represent Filea, which is the Philanthropy Europe Association, and we are a convergence between two organizations Some of you may have heard about the European Foundation Center or the donors and foundation networks in Europe. So now we are one organization. Who are we? Well, we are around 200 foundations with annual expenditure of around 22 billion and assets over 200 billion. We also have within our membership 28 national associations of donors and foundations. And through these national networks, we reach out to around 10,000 foundations across Europe. Our vision is for philanthropy to grow and to co-shape and support pluralistic, just and resilient societies that center people and the planet. So we do have a vision which includes also a value statement, and this is a very strong new development that we've been working on defining this new strategy, vision, and mission. So who are we? We are also one strong voice of European philanthropy, and we want to harness the immense multidimensional potential of European philanthropy. So philanthropy indeed is very diverse, and we consider that we would like to enable, amplify, anticipate, increase knowledge, learn, bring more learnings, and connect also foundations around issues of common interest. So you see, the data and the knowledge is also very important to us, the data and knowledge of the sector, and with that also we want to include this important research, which we think is a very important endeavor to undertake. I'm head of policy at Philea, and what we do there is that we work towards an enabling operating environment. And as Michael and others have said, foundations are indeed currently also struggling with some barriers. So that's one of our key mandates, is to help overcome barriers and to think about creative policy solutions in that regard. We also want to position philanthropy and foundations as a key actor in terms of societal issues and also as potential partners with others to collaborate on. Since the summer, we are also hosting the European Network of Enterprise Foundations. So that's an initiative that comes together, and Michael, you're also part of this network. That's a network of enterprise foundations doing exchange among each other about practice experiences and also organizing an event. So there is one event coming up on the 28th of October here in Brussels about enterprise foundations to shed more light into these type of organizations and explain it also better towards the general public and policymakers. Our work at Philea is guided by a legal affairs committee. So we have members which are either legal experts in foundations, including also Michael here from the Robert Bosch Foundation. Sorry, Michael, you're singled out as an active player here. And then also experts from the national associations. So it's the group that is guiding our work. What we are doing is we monitor, analyze, and we also engage with policymakers around what we do. So we have weekly monitorings and we have national mappings, country profiles, which might also be relevant for the purposes of this project, the ELI project. And we also have published comparative highlights, which illustrate some trends of what we see around the operating space for foundations and philanthropy. And also we do engage with academics and contribute to the discourse, including also our engagement here about this important project around enterprise foundations. We are also working with the Lilly Family School and also with the collection of case studies on barriers to cross-border philanthropy. So what barriers foundations also experience. So some of the barriers that were mentioned earlier is also something that we have noted. Just to illustrate briefly, the key findings from our work is that that the laws sometimes are slow in keeping up of the toolbox, the desire to enlarge the toolbox. And that certainly applies also to the enterprise foundations, because we sense that some countries have quite advanced laws dealing with this type of entities, whereas others have not considered, or even it is legally uncertain whether this type of organizations are legally allowed and what are the tools to set them up and operate. Some countries have become more flexible when it comes to capital requirements with regard to foundations. And we also see that there is an interesting debate happening in a European context about foundation laws, is that there is discussion whether external supervision that also unreferred to can to some extent also be replaced by self-regulatory mechanisms. And that's potentially something that is also relevant for the enterprise foundation discussion. What we sense and have observed is there is a tendency towards overregulation in some cases, and here I'm also referring to the, of course, valid need to fight money laundering, terrorism financing, but then this has led to a bit of overregulation at national level, very tight due diligence processes put on our sector, and sometimes even going beyond what is legally required. We also see that there are barriers to cross-border activities of foundations, and this is something I will not go into any detail here. We can share the slides later, but it is also that foundations as at yet do not benefit from the single market as companies do. So they cannot move their seat easily across border, they cannot merge. And as was mentioned also, there are sometimes foreign funding restrictions, which make the work complicated. We have then embarked in policy recommendations, which are evidence-based, because we identified barriers that we would like to see overcome. So that's something we do. And we are eagerly also collaborating with academic projects to understand their analysis of barriers and issues at stake, so that also our members and the wider constituency can work towards contributing to these policy recommendations to policymakers. And we are now ahead of the EU elections, which are coming up next year. We are updating our manifesto. So eager to potentially also get some of your views included in terms of what the project will potentially recommend with regard to policy change or ideas. Of course, this manifesto will then be used to exchange with the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council. And we've had some good successes over the past. We have, in the current mandate, received a lot of recognition of the wider social economy sector and the need to help overcome barriers. And in the social economy sector, the foundations are included as a family. So we are also taking up a representational roles to raise the visibility of the foundation sector and to also engage in terms of what are issues where one could collaborate, but also what are issues where potentially new policy is needed to enlarge and also protect the toolbox of foundation. So I will just highlight maybe a couple of initiatives which might also be relevant in the context of this debate. So there are these council recommendations on social economy, which were published in June this year. There is also a new legislative initiative for a European cross-border association, which was published on the 6th of December of this year. So that will be a new legal form, which is currently under discussion. And then there's a lot of also new studies around co-investments and for philanthropy and foundations in the making, which might also be relevant here. Overall, there are also other issues which impact on the space, including also the rule of law issues, but also recommendations on civic space published by the Swedish presidency, which also guarantee, in terms of freedom of association, some of the space which is relevant for foundations. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key elements around potential restrictions perceived by the foundation sector are also money laundering, terrorism financing policy, the last point on this slide. And that's where a new package is in the making, and where also we've been engaging as FILEA for more clarification on who actually is a beneficial owner of foundations, because that's something that we have seen as a main issue and barrier, that it's not really clearly defined who that beneficial owner should be, and there's currently an opportunity to clarify this in the current discussion around the EU AML package. So just the last slide here, very initial comments from our end, from FILEA and the philanthropy sector. We think it's a very important initiative to undertake this research and analysis of enterprise foundations. We have several of the enterprise foundations within our membership, and as I said earlier, we are now hosting also this specific group with the secretarial support. It will be very interesting from our experience to embark on defining what is an enterprise foundation, and here the need to potentially take a functional approach. We've already heard from the other distinguished speakers that there are sometimes the form is a limited liability company or a foundation as a civil law form, but there are potentially other constructions used which functionally are like a foundation, but legally would be slightly different. So that will be very interesting to agree on this definition and to move forward with this. Then what was presented by Anne, the need to map and understand the current legal regimes with regard to enterprise foundations. This is, of course, also needs to take into account the different legal traditions and cultures. What role also do these foundations that are owned, that own companies play in societies and in the economies? And this has a very relevant rooting back to we see countries where there is a dedicated legal form, where indeed there is a strong culture also of foundations owning companies. And then this needs to take into account that we do have some countries where foundations have to be set up for public benefit only. They cannot be there for private interests. And that some laws clearly allow foundations to be major shareholders, but that we also have observed that there are countries where it is more restrictive. And that then sometimes also is related to tax implications, because where foundations are major shareholders in companies and active shareholders, if the foundations themselves have a tax-exempt status, then that can also lead to tax implications and potentially also state aid rules, which is also an area or issue that would potentially need to be addressed by this project. And then, as was mentioned, governance issues is very interesting and relevant in this context. That is that, of course, foundations, they themselves as a legal instrument, they do not have members, they do not have shareholders, they themselves have governance regulations and issues. But if then they are major shareholders or owners, sole owners of companies, then this might also have implications on indeed best practice around governance. And there should potentially also be a discussion indeed what could be done in principled ways and what could or should be done included into legislation. And yeah, eager to contribute to this discussion. The final point then is it's a high ambition to craft a model law, and I applaud the efforts of going that way. It will certainly be a challenging exercise to do this, and it could also be accompanied potentially by considering core key principles that national enterprise laws could take into account. That's how we have been approaching the issue for general foundation laws in the past, that we had some difficulties in defining or agreeing on the model law, or the need to adapt to the flexibility with regard to all the national differences. Then it was useful to also add to the model law idea some general principles of how national good approaches could look like with regard to legislation. So I think that's about it. It was a bit of a run through. I hope I managed to do that on time. And yeah, very, very eager to be contributing to this project. And already the conversation here sparked some very interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your comments. I think they were very, very good and did not exceed time. So that was also great. And you're right, this is high ambition, and we are always looking forward also with other ELI projects to see whether it can be a model law or whether it should be guiding principles. But I'm sure this will, once you start working, you will see where we could actually end up. But it's nice with high ambitions, and then we'll see if we can come through with them. My next speaker is Ivan Todt, and I understand, Ivan, that you will also give some reflections from your side, and I'm looking very much forward to hear your comments to this also.
Thank you very much, Anna Brigitte. First, please allow me to extend my congratulations to the project reporters on their successful project proposal, which I believe holds significant potential to profoundly influence the regulation of enterprise foundations in Europe, but also possibly beyond. While the project proposal was adopted in July and we find ourselves at the kickoff webinar today, I think it's essential to acknowledge that this ELI project did not emerge recently from scratch. In fact, it represents a continuation of years of work on this subject, of research led by the project reporters, who have produced a wealth of scholarly work on this topic. If following this webinar, anyone wishes to delve deeper into the realm of enterprise foundation law, I highly recommend the book published this year by Intersentia and edited by Anne Zanders and Steen Thompson. Its title is Enterprise Foundation Law in a Comparative Perspective. And it provides a comprehensive overview of enterprise foundation law in 6 European countries: Germany, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Italy, but also in the United States. Beyond the project reporter's extensive background, another remarkable strength of this project lies in the meticulously planned comparative legal analysis of enterprise foundation law in Europe. I particularly commend the project reporters for their unwavering commitment to crafting a model law aimed at accommodating the diverse needs of numerous European countries. Alexander already touched upon this, but in my capacity as the chair of the Members Consultative Committee, I take immense pride in announcing that our MCC already boasts 15 individual ELI members and 2 institutional members from various countries, including, I have to read, Croatia, Cyprus, France, Germany, Georgia, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Serbia, and Spain. I firmly believe that the involvement of specialists from different jurisdictions in our MCC will greatly benefit the project. And I extend my gratitude to all members who have already joined our MCC. Of course, there is no limit to the number of members who can participate in the MCC, and I extend an invitation to all webinar participants who wish to actively contribute to the project to join our MCC. To do so, simply send an email to the ELI Secretariat. The email address is secretariat@europeanlawinstitute.eu. And all ELI members are welcome, especially those with expertise in foundation law, company law, tax law, and accounting law. However, membership is also open to anyone specialized in other areas of law, as it is not a prerequisite to be an expert in these areas of law I mentioned to join the MCC. If you're not an ELI member yet, this project presents an ideal opportunity for you to consider joining the ELI, and you can find all the necessary information about the membership, including membership applications forms, on the ELI's website. As a member of the MCC, you will receive project drafts for feedback at least twice next year, ahead of the ELI Council meetings in February and October. We will also occasionally convene online to discuss the project drafts within the MCC, as well as engage with the project reporters and their team. Additionally, you will receive invitations to participate in hybrid project workshops and the conference in Copenhagen, and the final discussion will precede the submission of the draft for approval by ELI bodies in August 2025. At that occasion, MCC members will be invited to submit their evaluations of the project's outcome. The level of involvement you choose in the MCC's work is entirely at your discretion. Many MCC members actively use this platform to formulate their views to try to influence the project results, while others may prefer to read materials, observe group discussions, and closely monitor the project's progress through access to the MCC materials. I believe I've covered all the key details about the MCC. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to raise them in the Q&A session. So I encourage all the webinar participants to join the MCC, and I eagerly anticipate collaborating with you on this exciting project. Allow me to conclude my remarks by extending my deepest thanks to Katja Coleman, Senior Project Officer at the ELI Secretariat, who has done an exceptional job organizing and coordinating the various groups involved in this project. Thank you very much. I wish you all a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you so much, Ivan, and also thank you for expressing the benefits of becoming a member of the ELI and or in actually engaging in the work which the ELI is doing. And this is one of the very important works. I looked at the Q&A, and the session, of course, is open, and I encourage everybody to come up and I think I have one now, and I will read it out, and then I will ask perhaps Sten first to comment on it, and then the others. It is asked, what is the scope of the project, as it seems not clear at this moment? Are you thinking exclusive of foundations, which are majority shareholders of a company, simply the foundations to do business using a company as an instrument, or also of foundations which just do business directly? What results of the projects are expected? What is to be dealt with by the model law? Only aspects regarding foundations as shareholders, or maybe law on companies owned by foundation? What is in the center of a research project, the foundations which own the companies, or the companies owned by the foundations? So Sten, would you like to start with this very big question and touch upon it, and then I think we will ask Anne and Eugenio and the others afterwards, perhaps to give some thoughts about that.
Yes. First, a very good question. Thank you very much. Indeed, there is a need for clarification here. And since there is such a big area, I think we'll need to focus in to have a realistic chance of fulfilling our mission. So as you mentioned, we are thinking actually on what we call holding foundations, meaning foundations which own companies. So there are a number of other foundations, usually combining a philanthropic or charitable goal in their business activities, such as, let's say, the museum books up, or the hospital, the private hospital, and so on. Many of them receive funds and so on, and are foundations or non-profits at least, you know. And those we are not really considering here. What we are really interested in is foundations as owners of companies and business companies. And we're interested in the effect which this has on the nature of the business which the company conducts. With regard to the model law, what we're interested in is, if, let's say, we want these entities in a country or at the European level, what is required? What elements do we have to have? What kind of permissibility do we have? If we have that kind of permissibility, what, let's say, regulation is necessary to make it work? What governance requirements, as Eugenio so forcefully alluded to? So what is the package, so to say? And then, of course, we'll have to see, if we have this ideal model, to what extent is it realistic to have it in country A, B, C? So that would be the barriers to the establishment. But there's also the other one, which Michael Redbrake alluded to, which is, once we have them, since many of them own multinational companies, really big, complex entities, what are the barriers to efficient operation? And for example, to what extent would the general recognition of the enterprise foundation as a legal figure help the international philanthropy, for example, which is being conducted, but also the nature of the business activity which is being conducted? So that would be a brief answer to a very fundamental and important question.
Thank you, Sten. Anne, would you like to touch a little bit also on this question?
Yes. Thank you so much. I do think that this, of course, we will, while, I mean, it's difficult to sort of exclusively look on sort of one thing while we're working on it. So of course we will concentrate on the foundation as a holding. If there are major issues coming up sort of while we are sort of researching it, we might address those as well. But it's, as Sten pointed out, it's extremely important to focus our work. I think with respect to the model law, I think something that Hannah just pointed out is very important, that we need to take into account legal culture and cultures, legal traditions in relation to foundations as well. So the foundation is at the center, and sort of the look what we can do with it. I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. And well, when working on the model law, we will keep that in mind as well, and maybe also pointing out in our explanations at what point maybe which part of the model law could be especially useful in a certain legal tradition or in another. So we will keep all of that in mind and see that within the model law and also the key principles, we will see how we can provide also sort of little building blocks that can be sort of adopted by national legislators, maybe one or two exclusively. So the model law is really, at least that's what we are discussing right now, a kind of toolbox that can be useful for different legislators and does not need to be sort of adopted in one piece, but can be used as a toolbox in different systems. I hope that helps us in addition to what Steen has pointed out.
Definitely, thank you so much, Anna. And Eugenio, would you like to comment also on this question?
Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, I think that the question is very important because actually, an enterprise foundation is a owner of a controlling interest of the company. And the question, what I found interesting in the question is whether the model law we are in mind will cover the foundation as an entity or the company which is owned by the foundation. I think that the model law that we have in mind that the project should focus on will only deal with the foundation as an entity, not the company. But this does not mean that the fact that we regulate a specific type of owner does not have important effects on the way the business is conducted. The same thing happens with family businesses. There is a lot of wide literature on family businesses and why certain times family businesses seem to be more financially successful than public companies, for example. And obviously, the company itself, which is owned by a family as opposed to the market, is regulated by the same set of rules. But the fact that the owner differs from one context to the other has influence, has impact on the way the company is conducted. So basically, the direct scope of the model law should be, and I think will be, the foundation as an entity. But the way we structure the governance of the foundation can have important effects also on the way the businesses that are foundation owned can be conducted. And as I was saying very briefly during my speech, the foundation enterprise the enterprise foundations seem to best interpret that role of stakeholderist capitalism that is in the perspective of Colin Meyer, for example, just to mention the most famous supporter of this line of thought. And that is exactly the type of job that we want to achieve, regulating the foundation in a way that also this specific unorthodox owner can contribute to a different type of capitalism, which does not mean that we need to criminalize public companies or traditional profit-driven companies. That's part of the competition. But the more we enhance the competition also at the level of organizational forms, the better the market will function. So to have a further, let's say, dish on the menu can be very important to also address those specific needs and those specific exigencies that come from the market, as the experience shows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gino. Michael, Hannah, is there anything you would like to touch upon in respect of this question? No.
Yeah, maybe just I think it touches upon a very interesting point, and that is that there are foundations who are also undertaking business activities or economic activities themselves. I think this is a separate question, but if the focus of this project is on the foundations as holding structures, of course, there have been a bit of debate in terms of what governance design is chosen, because there could also be designs of governance where potentially the foundation would have say in the actual running of the company, and that could potentially be considered economic activities in itself. So that will be, I think, discussions or conversations that you would have when discussing also the governance elements of it. But I understand that the focus here, of course, would be on the foundation as holding structures. What would then be, good legal frameworks, and also what would then be governance element that would be fitting in terms of having the right toolbox for these type of foundations. Thank you.
Thank you. Gino, there's a question to you now on the Q&A, where it says that you refer to the impact of enterprise foundation structure on the way business is conducted, and which aspect of impact will you be studying exactly in the project? So I think, Eugenio, if you would touch on that first, and I would like also to come up with another small question from my side, whether some of you would touch upon the purpose of the foundation as owner in a new, let's say, green economy, the whole economy situation which Europe is looking into, and the long-term ownership and the other agendas which is out there, the ESG agenda, and whether you think that this agenda could also have an influence on the way we look upon the ownership of companies by foundations. But I think, Eugenio, I would ask you to start first, and then I will go around the table afterwards.
Sure. So I'll address Conrad. You know, because that's the name of the person that's put this question to us. You know, the effects on the way the business is conducted, in my view, are not legal effects. They are de facto effects, because basically the type of owner, the incentives, the interests, also the non-economic interests that the owner of a business carries on, have an effect on the way the business is conducted. So think of these. The Enterprise Foundation is a foundation that owns a controlling business, a controlling interest in a business. So basically has this decision-making power about how to basically make profit, but is not the entity that will profit from that profit. Sorry for repeating the same word. Will not benefit from that profit, which is a very strange type of owner. But this strange type of owner, which apparently could be quite inefficient, proves to be quite successful. Why so? I think that the reason why foundations, industrial foundations, are successful is because they replicate certain good features of certain family businesses. And notably, the most important is the fact that if you know real entrepreneurs that I happen to work with, because that's part of my professional business, they're not interested in profit because they want to buy a car, because they want to have a private jet, or other. For them, profit is just the measure of their success, of their business being successful. And in principle, they could reinvest all the profit forever in the business and lead a very humble and sober life, because they are not interested in profit per se, but they are interested in profit as a measure of success. In a speech that I had some years ago in Copenhagen, I called this not the Homo economicus pattern, which is the type of pattern that law and economics has in mind, but rather the Homo gloriosus, meaning the man that seek prestige, recognition, and this is important because this is not economic. This is not an economic incentive, but this plays a role in the way a business is conducted, and it's huge. So if you think that human beings are made of reason but also passions, the fact that we could be able to shape a type of ownership model that best suits these passional, emotional side, then we could create the premise for success. And that's why that's where I see this interaction between disciplining the governance of these entities, these strange entities, because we have to admit it, they are strange entities that basically are a challenge, an intellectual challenge, but at the same time they interfere with the business. I hope that I covered your question, but your question is a very important one. It's not easy to give a simple answer, but it's a matter of reflection and intellectual stimulus.
Thank you so much. Anna, would you like to say something? And then I'll go to Steen. And
I think Steen should answer this question, because Steen has worked for many years, has done fundamental work, empirical work on actually how enterprise foundation are different than other owners in the business world. So I think Steen should take the first step.
Steen, for you. You're unmuted on mine.
Thank you. In this project, you know, we are not aiming to do fundamental social research, social science research. So this project will focus on the legal part, but of course we will reference it, you know, so we will reference the case and we will try to see some of the empirical studies which have been done, and we will mobilize them and look at their implications for how enterprise foundations laws should be structured. So it's relevant, but it's not here that we want to focus. Now, I think I agree with Eugenio for the most part in the de facto. It's not legal, but we can have legal ramification of the foundation structure on the way the business is operating. Because, for example, think about a founder which stipulates in the charter that the foundation should own the company forever. This is not unusual, or at least, you know, until further notice, we should say, you know, so it should aim to be the really long-term owner. And I think this has implication for the company and for the way the company can do business. In some sets, it's a limitation, but in other sets, it's an important advantage for the company because it knows that the preferences and ideals of the owners will be permanent, will play a permanent role. In many other companies, we don't know, if you're a publicly listed company, who is the owner 5 years from now. We just don't know, and we're going to have to make assumptions about that, and to what extent these these owners will value sustainability for that matter. And going back to Anne Birgitte's question here, what role does the foundation structure potentially play in the sustainability discussion? I think first of all, just to highlight this idea of the long term. Clearly, the climate challenge is very long-term. It's going to take us decades, if not centuries, to surmount the climate challenge, and it's going to require extreme patience. So this will put great demands on the owners because they will see their dividends, you know, kind of being limited because there will have to be a lot of investment in green transition. So this long-termism is very important, and we cannot demand that kind of long-termism from more short-term owners. Secondly, the philanthropic nature of most foundations, or at least the charitable or beneficial nature, if you will, of many foundations is important because the consistency that the foundation aims to do good, and then it doesn't make sense for the foundation to have a company which does not also contribute to the general social welfare. So there is an implied I wouldn't call it maybe philanthropy, but I would call it, beneficial nature of the ownership of the foundation ownership. So these things are very interesting, and we can see, for example, in Patagonia, how foundations can be structured precisely to overcome climate challenges.
Thank you so much, Steen. Michael, I was thinking you belong to one of these strange entities.
Yeah, perhaps one impression from the Bosch history. Yes, I will say one very important issue in this context is responsibility in society. Yes, based on some notes from Robert Bosch, who died in 1942. But you can find several remarks about this in the articles of association of the Robert Bosch Foundation. Yes, and I think there's an impact for the business behavior, especially in some issues we say in daily doing, for example, trust building, business fairness, business behavior, etc. I think there are several impacts based on this, and so this model could be really the base for such investigations. Yes, of course. I think that's very important side of this Enterprise Foundation project.
Thank you, Michael. We have got another question, which is it's from the Netherlands, where they have flexible laws, and we are then asked Dutch foundations are allowed to only have one managing director and no form of internal supervision. Do you have any thoughts on mandatory internal or external supervision, also in relation to risk of overregulation? Steen, I don't know if you will start with that question.
Yes.
And afterwards, Hannah, I would like to ask you a little bit about political influence, as you are also a lobbying organization, and the risk of political influence on the charitable issue or the philanthropy, and whether governments might have an interest there. But Steen, would you look about the regulation and regulatory?
Yes. Of course, we would all like as little regulation as possible, since there are costs to regulation. But we'll definitely have to consider governance and mandatory rules for governance, because the Enterprise Foundation can, as we've seen in many examples, be a really important economic actor, because owning large multinational companies like Robert Bosch or Carlsberg has major ramification of what's going on. And I think we have to discuss whether the price of this huge influence is not, there's a mirror obligation to be transparent, for example, and to have governance structures which are failure-proof to some extent. Of course, you can never guarantee against failure, but you can have checks and balances which reduce the likelihood of failure. And so there is a trade-off here between having, as servicing the founders, having as little obligations as possible, more flexibility and so on. On the other hand, we also need to make sure that there is efficient and responsible management of the resources and the power exercised by the foundations. So the arrow in this case, as in many others, will point to more transparency, for example, and also I think to having some sort of checks and balances on the foundations, which then I think the obligation may be bigger for enterprise foundations than for other types of foundations, which can retain their very flexible structure.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on this issue also? It doesn't seem so. Then, Hannah, would you like just to tell me a little bit about the political influence, how you see it from your organization side? So on one side, you have your lobbying for the foundations and with your manifesto and thing, but on the other hand, sometimes how do you see politicians coming to the foundations with a request list for, in one way or another, what they would like the foundations to do on the charitable and the philanthropy, sort of maybe not solve the climate crisis, but other things. So there might be an interesting counterpart to that, what we would like from the politicians, but that what they might actually ask from the foundations.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, I think first coming back to the point on the kind of the responsibility or the transparency and accountability question, I think Steen very rightly pointed to the huge responsibility, of course, that the foundations as holding structures of large companies have, and that then there will need to be also discussion around exactly transparency, accountability requirements that correspond to this responsibility of being these major shareholders, and then also considering potentially participation of other stakeholders in this or in governance structures. So that will be very interesting conversations to have in the project, I gather. And just coming back on the point of foundations, also the general foundations, they are reviewing how they do their asset allocation, whether they are major shareholders or simply shareholders in other companies or shares, is that some of them have become more conscious of how they do their asset allocation in a way that they are also considering more sustainable investments or more green investments or mission-related investments. And that's something to also potentially discuss in the context of the enterprise foundations, the link of being a major shareholder in a company that potentially also stands behind certain values or issues with regards to us moving towards a green digital transition that ultimately leaves no one behind. So that's a whole kind of political discourse that also the enterprise foundations are operating in. And just on the point of advocacy, yes, we are, of course, the DNA of our organization is as the philanthropy infrastructure. We care about the operating space for foundations and philanthropy. We want to enable that, and we see that there are still barriers. So we have our manifesto, as you rightly say, our policy recommendations. But one of the recommendations in there currently is also co-granting and co-investing and collaborating with other actors, including businesses, also including public actors. So we are facing such huge transitions in terms of the green and the digital that different actors have to come together. And we sense that there is more appetite also from public actors, including the EU itself, to collaborate with different actors, including our sector. So there are interesting discussions also in terms of how we can potentially create investment tools where also foundations could be coming in. And I think in this discourse, the discussion around the enterprise foundations is very relevant, because they are then the ones who are able to hold large companies, which ultimately, if there is a philanthropic purpose in addition to the one holding the company, they would also be contributing to exactly societal transitions, and hence they would also be key actors to consider in that context. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I was wondering if you have any comments, and then there was a specific question, and I think maybe you're close to answering that, because that dealt with the Gesellschaft mit verbundene Vermögen under German law.
Yes.
I'm not sure, Sten, it's not because of Genio, you're very familiar with that, but I thought
I think I will answer that. Given that I'm one of the major draftsperson working on that project in Germany, as Michael has already pointed out rightly, this project, this kind of company law form hasn't been adopted in Germany yet. It's under discussion. What I think, however, is that it is of importance within this project, because there are some important issues raised in this context. Something like questions like governance, something like flexibility, but also questions like, why do entrepreneurs think these kind of approaches to entrepreneurial work today are important. And so I think, of course, the topics coming up here will be addressed or will be taken into account in this project. But of course, the Gesellschaft mit gebundenem Vermögen, the question steward ownership, is a question that is closely connected to enterprise foundations, but foundations are entities without any members. And the Gesellschaft mit gebundenem Vermögen, the company would have members and shareholders, and so that there are differences there as well.
Thank you very much. Ivan, I was thinking, do you from the members committee have any issues you would like to bring forward from the discussion we have heard this afternoon?
Thank you, Brigitte. Well, I think I covered everything what was necessary to be said about the work of the membership or members consultative committees. But I will briefly wanted to get a little bit back to the question made by Professor Konrad Osaida, and to point out one specific issue which might have been left neglected, and that is that we are talking the whole day about enterprise foundations, but it is important to realize that one of the important and possibly first outcome of the project is to develop a legal definition of the enterprise foundations. So it may come as something simple, but in fact it really isn't. So I really commend the project reporters for putting that first. Yeah, so there were several questions related exactly to this. So I think that it is necessary to underline that one of the outcomes of this project will indeed be a developed legal definition of enterprise foundation.
Thank you very much, Ivan. We are slowly coming to an end. We have a few minutes left. Sten, I was wondering whether you and maybe your co-reporters and Eugenio just would summarize where we are going next. You, of course, we know the next meeting is in Copenhagen, but I suppose there will also be some work done in between, and how you would like the membership, whatever, to communicate with you and the working plan there.
Yeah. So first, just a few notes. I think this discussion of regulation is very interesting. And one thing we didn't cover is we can imagine total regulation of foundations, making them effectively part of the government sector. Now that would be a disaster, right? So this would defeat the whole purpose of having private foundations. So clearly there's a limit to the type of regulation we can have. So the question is really valid. We need to find types of regulation which can accommodate the private nature of foundations. Secondly, we didn't really go, I mean, this is my, what I do normally. I examine the empirical effects of foundations ownership. And basically we find that foundation-owned companies tend to be more responsible with regard to their employees on all the ESG ratings, on sustainability, on climate, and so on, as you might expect, given their hard philanthropic nature, or at least non-selfish nature, and they also tend to be longer-term owners and so on. So it appears that also empirically they are delivering, but we also find variation. So huge variations, but statistically significant effects here. Then about the project, yes, indeed, we have highlighted a structure, a workflow. But within that, we already have plans, for ad hoc meetings about, shouldn't we have a meeting about this? Shouldn't we have a meeting about that? But we just wanted you to be able to reserve the dates for the first, if you will, startup conference. This is the kickoff seminars, and now we have a startup conference, and then later on we'll have a comparative conference, and then we'll pick up on all the aspects that we raised. So we imagine lots of meeting activities. And by the way, I think not all of it should be in Copenhagen, although it's convenient for some of us who work here. I think we should also have it in other places in Europe, and I'm very willing to travel around. So we'd welcome suggestions for meeting avenues and so on, and seminars and topics which we can include in the project. I think, for example, that it might be nice to have some of it located in Italy. Which is a very nice venue, and
sure,
stimulates Renaissance thought. So that was what
Thank you, Anne and Eugenio. Do you have any closing remarks as project reporters?
I think I just want to sort of highlight something that Eugenio said, that this strange division of power and ownership in a way, or of power and money maybe, is something that leads to extremely interesting developments in business, and offers extremely interesting opportunities for making our business, our economy more diverse, and also make it possible to adapt to our new needs for transformation. I think nobody here advocates that only enterprise foundations should rule the world and that there should be no other businesses. But what we think is that this model, this division of power and financial ownership, so to speak, that this is something that can really add something to the world, not exclusively, but as a part of a more diverse economy we need for the future.
Thank you, Anne. Eugenio, I think I gave you a new title as co-reporter, but I just said you're more than that. You are an advisor. So, but actually, as advisor, do you have any further remarks you would like to come up with now?
I think it was a fantastic webinar. I'm very happy to have attended it. And Sten and Anne are colleagues and friends, and have thoughtful ideas, and very stimulating. I think that this topic of all the advantages and disadvantages of this disconnect of ownership and control, as as power of money, as Anne said, is very important. That's why I think that the governance will be the central matter that we need to investigate. Based on my professional experience, I made a lot of effort when advising my clients how to structure the governance of these strange entities in a way that could preserve the longevity and the identity of the firm. So I thought about the governance mechanism a lot, and I would be happy to have a look at a survey, a global survey of all the bylaws of the foundation, industrial foundations, because I think that we can get a lot of inspirational ideas in order to structure a governance that need not be necessarily mandatory, but could work as a default regime that could promote the best practice when it comes to industrial foundations.
Thank you so much, Gino. Then I will close our session because we had until 2 o'clock, and it is exactly 2 o'clock. And coming from a Nordic country, we always try to time wise. So I want to thank our whole panel for this fantastic discussion, for your engagement. I'm really looking forward to following the work. All contributions has been very, very enlightening and excellent. We have had good questions, Q&As. There are a few we have not touched upon yet, but we will get them, and we can get an answer to them perhaps in writing afterwards if it is possible. And then as an assessor, I look very much forward also to follow the discussion and to see the final project in a little bit more than a year's time. So thank you very much to all of you, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.